Hello everybody. In this video, I will talk about the Mauryas, Satavahanas, and the Indo-Greek trade. So let's get started. After Alexander the Great's invasions on the Indian subcontinent, the Nanda Empire was ruled by a very cruel king called Nanda. Nanda was very unpopular and he was very corrupt. A man by the name of Chandragupta Maurya did not like how Nanda was very corrupt. He had a dream of unifying the entire Indian subcontinent under one rule. A wise scholar by the name of Chanakya decided to help Chandragupta Maurya overthrow the Nandas after Chanakya was previously insulted by Nanda at a court. Chandragupta's origins are very unclear. Many Buddhist, Jain, and Hindu sources say different things. Some sources state that Chandragupta Maurya was a shepherd, while others state that he was a distant relative of the king Nanda. Chanakya made alliances with smaller kingdoms that were not as big as the Nanda Empire that had very bitter relationships with the Nanda Empire. Chanakya convinced many smaller kingdoms near the Nanda Empire to turn against the Nanda Empire. Chanakya also kept the Nanda Empire's allies distracted so they would not interfere. It also didn't help for the Nanda dynasty that Nanda was very unpopular, while Chandragupta and Chanakya were very tolerant and wise men. Nanda was finally killed by the Mauryans, and the Mauryans took over the Nanda Empire. They established the new Mauryan Empire. After the Mauryan Empire was established with Chandragupta as its king, many of the Mauryan allies gave him their land. And in this way, most of North India was under the Mauryan Empire. This happened around 322 BCE. After Chandragupta founded the new Mauryan Empire, Chanakya, who by now Chandragupta saw as his teacher and advisor, wrote the Arthashastra. The Arthashastra contained all sorts of things about politics, military strategies, and other things related to the government. By 305 BCE, Chandragupta had conquered most of South India as well as North India. Because of this, King Seleucus of the Seleucid Empire, which was Greek as I mentioned earlier, wanted to destroy the Mauryan Empire and inherit all of that land. And so the Mauryan-Seleucid War had begun. Just a few years after fighting, the Mauryan Empire and the Seleucid Empire signed a peace treaty. The Mauryan Empire gained new lands in the north like modern-day Afghanistan and modern-day Pakistan. In the peace treaty, the Mauryans gave 500 war elephants to the Seleucids, and thus began the friendship between the Mauryans and the Seleucid Empire. Unlike the Nandas and Shishunagas, Chandragupta Maurya was very tolerant, and he was very popular also. At the end of his reign, he renounced the throne to join a group of Jain monks. After the renunciation of Chandragupta, BINDUSARA, who was Chandragupta's son, became the new king. BINDUSARA led many expeditions into South India. Not much is known about his reign, but it is known that he had a son called Ashoka. After BINDUSARA's death, his son Ashoka murdered all his brothers and took over the throne. Ashoka led a conquest into modern-day Orissa, then known as the Kingdom of Kalinga. He murdered many civilians and destroyed their capitals, and then he annexed their territory. However, after seeing all the bloodshed he caused, he regretted his decisions. Now, instead of fighting, he listened to Buddhist and Jain scholars. And like his grandfather Chandragupta Maurya, he was also very popular and tolerant. Ashoka carved edicts and instructions into rocks in the Brahmi script. The Brahmi script is one of the earliest known Indian scripts. These edicts were known as the Brahmi inscriptions. There are some evidences stating that early forms of Sanskrit were also written in the Brahmi script. However, after Ashoka finally died around 230 BCE, his successor, Dasharatha, was a very weak king. He even lost most of South India to the newly formed Satavahana Empire, which was a Telugu empire. The Satavahanas excessively traded with the Greeks, and they've expanded north to the Mauryan Empire. Under the Satavahana kings Kanha, Shatakarni I, and Satakarni II, the empire expanded into North India, and most of South India. During this time in modern-day Tamil Nadu, the sangam literatures were being composed. The sangam literatures were full of entertaining stories, hymns, and poems. So while South India was flourishing in a golden age, the Mauryas in the north were declining. Around 180 BCE, the last Mauryan king, Brihadrata, was assassinated by a group known as the Shungas, thus ending the great Mauryan Empire. Soon after the Mauryans' decline, the Satavahanas also started to go into decline. However, around 100 AD, the Satavahana king called Gautamiputra Satakarni restored its power by conquering other kingdoms. It was during this time that the Cheras, Cholas, and Pandyas were conquered by the Satavahana Empire. The Satavahanas also built the great city of Amaravati, which they established as their capital. However, the kings after Satakarni were very, very weak, and around 300 AD, the Satavahana Empire came to an end. This would pave the way for the Chalukya, Pallava, Chola, Chera, and Pandya kingdoms to form. The Chola, Chera, and Pandya kingdoms were actually getting reformed after being defeated by the Satavahanas. Anyway, that will end today's video. Thanks for watching.